This movie is going to support this lab material here for setting up a web application model view controller project with Visual Studio. So the link for the guide is here. So first of all, I'm using a virtual machine. So I've got a nice clean install, and I'm going to open up Visual Studio, which opens up like so. And I'm going to create myself a new project down here. Once I've created a new project, this will open up a range of different templates for me to use. There's loads and loads of stuff in here to choose from, and I'm going to choose this one here though, because we're going to use ASP.NET Core to create a web application, and this is going to create what's known as an MVC for us. So that's the option I want. Be careful you choose that one and not the older .NET framework. We're going to go with ASP.NET Core web application. Hit next. And we'll give our project a name. I suggest in the documentation here that you might want to call it My College Site. So I'll call it My College Site. I've got one already called that, so I'll just call it My College Website. And that will be the solution name as well. So that's all good. We'll hit Create. And then it should ask us what kind of ASP.NET Core web application we would like. I'm going to use .NET Core 3.1, and I'm going to select a web application model view controller, which is a software engineering paradigm. It's what's known as a design pattern. So this is going to create a project template for creating an ASP.NET Core application. With a example MVC views and controllers. That's exactly what we want. I think I choose to untick configure for HTTPS. If you don't do that, you might get some security messages that worry you because we're not on a secure connection. So untick that is the easiest thing to do, and then click create, and it will go away and create for us a sample site. It's scaffolding a site for us. There we go. So I'll just juggle this down to here. So we've now got a site built. We can see the files over here. We'll investigate these in a second. To see it running, click on the green IIS Express. That's Internet Information Explorer. And that should open up. So it's opened up there, and I can see it running off localhost. So localhost is the way that you can have a server running locally to provide you with a local development area, local development environment. It's not something that's unique to .NET or ASP or Core or anything like that. You could have local hosts in all the web server technologies. So you can set them up for PHP, for Node, for Ruby, for Python. It's a standardized way of having a local web server running. Right, so what have we got here? We've got a page that is built using, we've got a page here running on local host. You'll have a different port number than me. We can see we've got My College Site. It looks quite nice. This is our home page, and we've got a privacy page as well. So it's scaffolded these two pages for us. The appearance of it, the styling of this is due to Bootstrap. Now Bootstrap is a CSS framework. You can find more out about that by just Googling it, and you'll find you've got this big CSS framework. I'm of the view that that's a little bit too complex for our purposes here, so we're going to strip that out and see how we can add in our own CSS. So to stop the application running, you can click stop debugging. So if you follow along in the guide, we've now just tested it. We've seen it running, and you've seen it running on localhost. So let's review the structure of this model view controller application. So MVC, model view controller, is a design pattern. It's used in not only in web applications but in mobile, in desktop, all over the place in software engineering. and it's a design pattern, so the idea is that you could repeat the pattern for different applications, different projects. So the idea is basically you have a model, you have views, and you have controllers, and the idea is that the model holds the business logic. Simplistically, that's the data of the application. The views are what you see. So in the case of a web application, that would be HTML. And the controllers, they allow the communication between the model and the view in a concept known as separation of concerns. So the controllers is where we'll put the logic that dictates what from the model we'll use in the view. Now we're not going to use the model in this little example. We can get away with just using the controllers and the views. There is another folder that we will use though, which is www.root, and that's the location of all our static files. So hopefully what you'll draw out from this lesson is that you can have dynamic files. They are pages, files within your web application that are built dynamically, so they require, in this case, C# to run some magic on the server. And then there are static files, which can just be normal HTML files, JavaScript files, images, style sheets, things that don't require any input from the .NET server logic. Quite why you'd want dynamic pages? Well, the headline is ideally you tie them up to some data, to a database. We won't do that in this video, but we will do in the next one. And so what we will do is we'll see how a dynamic page can be created and set up to accept data. So the views themselves are controlled in here. And so you'll see if you go to views and home, those two that we were just looking at were index CS HTML. So that's C# HTML. So that was the index page. And then there's the privacy page there as well, the privacy policy page. Now when you look at these, you might think naturally there seems to be a lot more going on HTML wise than I'm seeing in these two files, and that's because the MVC setup is actually building those pages using this shared layout here. So if I go into shared and into underscore layout, this layout C# HTML file, you see there's a lot more involved, there's a lot going on in there. There's where it's automatically added in my college website for me. And so this is the HTML that's required from Bootstrap. You can see Bootstrap being loaded in there. If I scroll down, it's this line here, line 34, at render body, that is the server is processing that to reading that content for the index page, for the home page, and then this content for the privacy page. So this is a template that's been used in both those instances. And so that's where it's loaded in Bootstrap. Now, I think, as I suggested, I think Bootstrap is a little bit excessive for our purposes here. So we've got enough on our plates without looking at how the Bootstrap CSS framework works. So I'm going to replace the content of that underscore layout C# HTML with this more simplistic version. You see you've just got a really basic HTML with an at render body in it. So I'll copy that and I'll go into here and I'm going to do Control A, select it all, paste over my new version and then save it. Once saved, let me rerun it. So I'll run the IIS Express, Internet Information Services Express, run that again. It's running off localhost again. You can see it thinking about it. So see, we've now got a much more basic page. There's the same content. Because we've stripped out the template, we've lost easy access to the privacy page, but it's still there. We just need to find the path to it, which is that home policy, home privacy. So that's still running. If just to prove that as well from another angle, if I went to the index page here, so that's Bootstrap content there. Let me delete that and I could put in my own hello world. And then if I save that and then run that now, it should pop up with just a hello world, so we can see that that's working fine. Okay, so I'll stop that. Right, so So that's dynamic pages. We'll come back to them and add some more details in a moment. You might have, where's the dynamic element? Well, it's this up here, this view data is providing dynamic data to this application. So that home page value is being automatically added in, and you could use the at syntax to add them at view data title. I could have put that in the text of the dynamic page if I chose to. Right, so now let's quickly move on to static pages and we'll revisit dynamic briefly. So static pages are all stored in this www root folder. So inside of here, that's where the CSS and the JavaScript and static HTML pages will live. So you'll see in lib here, this is where they've added in the Bootstrap stuff automatically for us. So I want to replace that with my own fairly simple structure here. So I've got a set of files in this www root folder, and a little index page, a little sample page, and some images in a style sheet. So what I want to do is replace this content with that. So I'll right click on www root and I'll select open folder in File Explorer, so I know where that is in the file structure. It opens up like so, and I'm just going to delete what was created for me, and I'm going to replace it with this content instead. So I'll move that over. Right, so I'll go back to here. So now in www root, there's my more simplistic set of static files. So let's fire off the server, and I should be able to, it'll take me to that home page again. But if I put in /sample.html, which is one of my sample static pages, there's a static page being delivered. Now it's a little bit confusing because I've got an index page, a static index page, and I've got a static, and I've got a dynamic index page. So if I click on sample home page, that's the static home page there. So you can see it's looking at HTML, but if I let the MVC do its system, it's delivering the index. So we need to make a decision which one of those we would want to use. And what I'm going to just show you is how you can use the static index page to be your home page rather than the one provided by the MVC. So this just requires a little bit of edit of a file called startup. So this is startup.cs, it's a C# file. It will be at the bottom of your list in the files, and you'll see around about line 39 there's something called use static files. So I'm going to amend that slightly by adding this use default files before it. So I'll copy that snippet and just replace that with this. So now if I save that and I load up my server again, off we go, and it should take me to my static home page this time, which it does, and I can easily link to the other pages. If I wanted to find my privacy page, that is still there under that address, and the what we're going to do is we're going to create our own dynamic page next, which is this link here that I've not created yet. So we're going to create a page for courses that's going to list some course information for our little college website. So that's the next thing to do. Let me switch off the server and return to the documentation. So dynamic pages are controlled through the controller. So if we go to controls, we have in there, we've got home controller.cs. And the way that this works is that this home controller will reference views inside the home in views home. So currently we've got index and privacy. So if I go into home controller.cs, there's lots of stuff in here, all kinds of fancy stuff that we don't need to worry about too much at the moment. But on line 21, this iActionResult method here, this is what's calling the index view, and that was creating the dynamic home page for me. this one here, the privacy one that it gave us by default, that was calling the privacy view. So what I could do, following that pattern, is I could create myself my own method here to call a new view. So I want to create one called courses. So I've got this code snippet here, so I'll copy that, and that's going to go into home controller after the privacy reference. And then I need to create a view. Let me show you why. If I ran that now and I attempted to visit the courses pages, there is a controller there, but .NET will tell me that there's no view. Okay, the view courses was not found. So there's a problem there. I need to create the view. So the naming convention is, I'll repeat what I did with privacy. There's privacy. There's a privacy page in home. That's the way that this is working. So the quick way to do that would just be duplicate privacy. So I'll Control C, Control V to duplicate it, and then I'll rename that as courses with a capital C, spelt correctly hopefully, to match the name I used in the controller. So I double click on that. Currently, because it was copied from privacy, it's got the same content as privacy in there. So let's add some of our own content into this to tell the difference. So there's this code snippet here to create the C# HTML for our views page. So I'll overwrite that with that. Right, so let's fire that up. So we've now got a view that matches the controller. So there's my sample dynamic page, the course page I just created, and having a little think about this, and there's my dynamic page. Okay, not too dynamic. You might be saying, oh, I could do that in 2 seconds in HTML. Fair enough. So let's make this more interesting, and this will kind of start to feel towards why this is such an important technology, because I'm going to amend the controller here so that we send some data through to the view. So in order to do that, I'm going to amend that method with this slightly more complex one here. So I'm going to overwrite what was there in courses with this fuller example, and what I've got here is an array of strings with 3 course names in, and then I've created a list. I've put the array into the list, and I've sent the list through as a parameter to this thing called view data. And view data is a way that we can move data from the controller here to the view. So inside of my courses view now, I can now make use of that list. So again, I've given you a snippet so you can see how this works. So this is some C# within the dynamic C# HTML page that's got a for each loop to go around that list and extract each of the names of the courses. So I'll copy that, and let's replace what I initially put in the courses C#.html, the view, with this more interesting code with some genuine server-side dynamic code going on there. So if I run that, what I'll get this time is when I click on sample dynamic page, it should list the courses for me. So what I'm getting there is I'm getting a paragraph tag for each of those items in the list. So if I inspect it, see those paragraphs have been created dynamically for me by the server. That's why we call this a dynamic technology. So let's just have a little play with that, a little bit of an experiment. So we've reached the end of the instructions here, but my suggestion is, could we change that to appear in a list? Okay, so what we could do is we could, in the view, we could put in a UL for a list. Let me use the Alt keys to move this down. So put the UL at the other side of the loop, and then I'll change this here so that's a list item. It's done it for me at the other end, and then I can delete that duplicate one there. So see, inside of the loop is a list item, so every course is going to be put inside of a list item ULLI HTML list item construct. So now go on here, go to dynamic pages, and this time they should appear in a nice little HTML list, which they do. Right click and inspect. There they are. And the other thing I could do is I could add a style sheet to this. So if I wanted to add a style sheet, how would I do that? Let me stop the server from running. So remember what we did is we stripped out the style sheet from this layout because it was using the Bootstrap one. So I could go to the layout one, which is controlling all my dynamic pages, and I could, in standard fashion, I could load in from my static pages my main.css, and that will load that style sheet in to any pages that are using layout, which is all three of these. So if I now run that, you'll see it will pick up the font now, which it wasn't doing before. So you can see that's Arial, and this will also be Arial now, indicating it's using the same styling. Okay, so let's just do one last example. So let me style up this with a table instead. So a HTML table is a table tag, and then for each of our courses I'd want a row. Let me stick a table cell in, let's say courses, and then I'll put this in a TD as well. So that's @item, that's my dynamic course name. So that now is going to repeat for every course. Let me just lay that out a little bit nicer so you can see this here is just going to create a cell there and a cell to the side. So each course is going to be placed in a nice table. Save that, run it. So fires up, we go to this page here, and this will be laid out in a table. Now it won't look quite, there is a table there. If I inspect, you see this content is being created dynamically for me. So for each course it loops around and it creates a row. So let's close that down. Let me go to my CSS. Let's amend my CSS a little bit. So I went to my CSS, I want to make that table look a little bit nicer. I could go in here, I could say table border collapse, just gives me some control over the table. And let's give each row a border along the bottom of 1 pixel solid. Great. Okay, so I can just amend that style sheet just as you would do in a normal non-dynamic page. Let's restart it. Let's go to my table. It's not showing the table, it's probably because it needs cache busting. So I'll just in Chrome empty the cache and hard reload. You can see there's the simple table styling. Now, the point of all this is that eventually this data here will be coming from a database. That's what we'll do next time. Let's show you how we could manually kind of simulate that, because I could add in another course. So let's say we add in a course of games development. So I just add that into that comma separated list. Visual Studio is telling me there's something wrong there. When I roll over, it will give me a clue. It's saying an array initialized of length 3. So obviously I've added a new item, so I'll change that to 4. Should fix it, save it, run it. And now when I go to my course list, I should have the 4 courses in there, and I didn't have to do any additional work to the view. Okay, so where we'll head next time is this will get to come out of a database, a proper database, rather than hard coding it in like that. Okay, thank you very much.